Your problems are in bad TXT. Are you asking for help with this project? You didn't say that, you didn't say what you wanted exactly. I guess this document says. Okay. Uniting similar instead functions. Okay. So let's look at this first thing, or the second thing, I guess, because I mean, I can't really judge without looking at the code, but let's start looking at the code with the debug level stuff. Is this your main NN? Yeah. So what have you tried so far to implement a debug level? Do you have something you tried, or I don't know what you're getting at. Because it seems like you know how to read an argument, but I don't know where the trouble is. You have no idea about C++ and don't know what's going on. Well, that's fine. We can learn together. Something that gets a lot of people when they first get a high university. Really? That potato gamer? I would imagine it defaults to the max. Kind of like how Windows will default to the max resolution, right? Debug H. Okay. Where's debug H? It ain't there. Debug H doesn't exist, bud. You mean in here? NNH? No. Windows default is 60, really? Okay. I guess maybe we'll skip past that for now. Instead of delete list and their elements, you'd like to use proto-list, okay? Delete list and their elements. If the size is bigger than 0, look at the end. You mark the end, and then you delete the item, and you're logging stuff here, okay? And then you delete the list. Okay. So let's copy this code. Let's put it here. So I'm going to delete these comments, the printfs, just so they're not getting in my way. One comment I want to make is you have d equals data. Why don't you rename d to be data so you don't need to explain what d means? Boom. Code is now more self-explanatory. You don't need that comma, that comment. Anyway, so you're iterating over the thing, and while it's not the beginning. So here you're looping over the entire list backwards. What you can do, so I want to do this like one step at a time instead of doing it all at once, just so we can go through the process. So I assume this is std list. Yeah, std list. So let's look at the documentation. Virtual visualization base class icicle plot. Okay. All visualization have custom parameters for which I define some custom UI elements. Why does the visualization itself need to do that work? Like the visualization could have a like your base class could have a create elements or create UI widget function that creates the widget, right? Well, we'll get there. I don't know why you want to use boost, but oh, sorry, shredofpiece. I was talking to Cloaks when I was talking about the widget thing. I got switching conversations. Oh, Cloaks. Look into the factory pattern. Maybe you want the factory pattern where you have a icicle factory and it creates the widget and the associated state. That makes sense? Anyway, for list, you're calling begin and end. We're back to shredofpiece. You're calling begin and end. There's these things called rbegin and rend that give you a reverse iterator. So it's basically if you swap begin and end, that's sort of what rbegin and rend do. So let's use, so to make it, I think it makes it more clear that you're iterating in reverse if you use rbegin and rend. So let's do that. So we get rbegin is similar to end, and then rend would be similar to begin. And when we subtract, instead we need to add, and we add after and not before. So what does this give us? Well, the thing this gives us is this looks, so one thing this gives us is we can put this condition up the top. So instead of a do while, we can just use while. Does that make sense so far? I don't want to go too far ahead. Shredofpiece. Yeah, I'll get to the standard library array stuff. I want to show this process. Do I currently work for Facebook? No, I do not. Do the changes I made so far make sense? Of using rbegin and rend instead of begin and end, and changing the do while into a while. Well, let's take the closer look now, because I don't want to. I want you to understand the things that I'm going through. So let's step back a bit. Let's undo what we did. So if we have let's say we have this linked list. This is like a visual representation. And if we, so this would be begin. If we have an iterator pointing to x, then we can call that the begin. And there's like this fake thing at the end, which doesn't really exist, and that's called the end. And it doesn't really exist because we can't dereference it. It's not really an item. But if we subtract end, like you're doing here, then we go back 1 to the z, and then we can delete the data at z, and then we can go back to y and delete the data at y and go back to x and delete the data at x, right? That's what your program is doing. So the purpose of our begin and our end is similar. Let's make some space here. So our begin points to this, our begin, because when you dereference our begin, if I say star L our begin, this is like saying L back. It's getting the last thing. Okay, so it's different than end, because you can dereference our begin, but you cannot dereference end. And our begin has an analog to end, which is our end, and that points to some fake thing that doesn't really exist. And just like end doesn't exist, like it refers to something that you can't dereference. Our end is the same way, where this thing doesn't exist, you can't dereference it. However, when you increment our begin, you go backwards in the list because it's a reverse iterator instead of a normal forward iterator. It goes backwards. So if you get the iterator and then you say, like for your algorithm, you would get the rbegin and then delete it, and then go back 1 by using plus plus, then delete the y, then go back 1 plus plus, then delete the x, and then go back 1 plus plus, and then you reached our end and you can stop. Hello, JoklaTube. So, redoing things. So first we change our end, we change end to our begin, and begin to our end. Instead of minus minus, because we used to go backwards, like with a forward iterator, and that means minus minus, but now we're going backwards with a reverse iterator, which means plus plus. So we need to use plus plus here, and then instead of incrementing before we access the element, we need to increment after, because if we increment before, then because we start it here to z, if we increment before, we're going to go to y and not delete z, but we do want to delete z. So we'll delete the z first and then move on to y. So we swap the order of those things. So does that make sense? Using reverse iterators? Let me reread your comments so I understand better. Put our list from the standard library boost again. Could I benchmark the two methods? No, I'm not going to. The performance of your program is garbage. I can tell you that. But we're not going to go into performance unless you want to go into performance. But I think you're a few steps away from getting performance right now. And I'll show you why when we're done here. So because our thing is not empty, we know that our begin is not equal to our end. So this would be always true if we put it here. So we can assert that this is true. But if we remove this if, then we cannot assert that is true. So what I'm trying to do is get rid of this if. So to do that, we need to make a weird code change, and that is turn your do while into a while loop. This preserves the behavior except we have an extra check, but the extra check will always be true, so it's fine. But how do I feel about Clean Architecture and Solid by Robert Martin? I'm a supporter. I think Clean Architecture, Robert Martin makes it sound like Clean Architecture applies to most or every program, but it doesn't. It applies to a lot of programs, but it doesn't really apply to video games or operating systems or a bunch of other kinds of software. So you need to have that critical thinking and think, okay, does this apply to the kind of work I'm doing right now? So it's easy to go down a slippery slope where you think everything should be clean architecture because it has the word clean in it. How should you continue study after completing? Well, what do you want to study? Are you most interested in the educational aspect of software? Because if you said study, it sounds like you want to study and learn. But a lot of people come into software so they can make things and work in industry. And that's where I have more experience in. So if you want to work in industry, then that's a different question than where do you study. Full stack web development. I need to ban the words full stack from this chat. So web development, I'd say the best way is to join a company and get a lot of experience working on a company where there's real business needs and priorities are changing all the time and all that fun stuff. How come I don't have who is protection for my domain? Why do I need who is protection? You can work around who is protection super easy. Shredofpiece, do you follow what I'm doing so far? Or am I not answering your question? Because I'm aware that I'm not answering your question, but I'm still trying to get there, but maybe you don't see the connection. Why don't I like the term full stack? Because it's a lie. It's not the full stack. When people say full stack, they mean the full stack that they're aware of and that they're working in, which isn't the full stack. Okay. Joklatube, I'll get to your question in a moment. So we have this while loop. We can convert this to a for loop. So I don't know if you're familiar with for loops, but we can write the initial condition here. Then we have the well, the initial code here, and then we have the condition that's evaluated every iteration of the loop, and then we have the thing that happens at the end of the loop, end of each iteration, and then we have the body of the loop. So we delete I. So this should be the same as this, right? Do people still actually write in assembly? Yes, I was working in assembly a few weeks ago. And I'll probably get to that after I'm done with my chat thing. So this, I hope you agree, is a bit better than this. This is like more idiomatic. When people read this, they can quickly scan it. They may have to like say, oh, there's this R here, what does that mean? Oh, they're doing it in reverse. But it's still, this is a common pattern for using an iterator in C++. From someone not familiar with C++. Is there anything that prevents dereferencing a null pointer in the first if? You mean here? Dereferencing L if L is a null pointer? Is it considered a good practice to check for null pointer in non-static functions before doing anything with them? I'd say it's not good practice to check for nulls, because if you check for nulls, that means, well, what are you going to do if you get a null? Like what would, I guess that's the more important, like you check for null and then what do you do? I'll let you answer that question. Do I think that front-end is really considered the easiest to learn? No. Right, who considers any software easy to learn? Can we ban Agile and DevOps too? Agile, sure. DevOps, I haven't heard that being overused. Would a compiler optimize better with the for loop? No. No, it wouldn't. Return an error in a non-void function. In this case, it'd be just return. Oh, so that means if you have a null somewhere, you're hiding bugs and making functions not behave the way that you intended them to behave. In that case, you should totally let null be dereferenced and have the program crash. That is much better, in my opinion, than hiding bugs and making the bug appear somewhere else, further down the line. Like, a null pointer is bad enough because you don't know where the null was created. But the further you kick the can down to some other poor guy who has to deal with the null pointer, the worse the problem gets. Front end is not web. Front end could be a mobile engineer working on a mobile application. In C, 4 gets better optimized than while 1. I think I need a reference for that, Dr. Zaney. Sounds pretty crazy. Is XOR EX still a thing? Yes. The user can be notified. If not, the program may not crash and produce a funky result. Well, just returning isn't notifying the user, so shredofpiece. Anyway, once we get this loop going, I'll delete this crap. This loop will work for any size list. It doesn't need to have at least one thing in it. So we don't need to check that it has at least one thing in it. So we can delete the if as well. So now we have a much shorter function. Code is from 2009. Like you wrote it in 2009, or what? Or somebody else wrote it? Printf. Well, so it depends. It really depends. For a function like this, I would never do that because this function has no business in telling the user anything. This function has no connection with any user interface. So passing null would be a programmer error, not a user error. It would be a programmer concern for why it's null, not a user concern. And how this function tells the user depends on the user interface. And this function doesn't know what the interface is. It doesn't know if it should printf or show a message box or return a status code over the network so that the other end of the software running on a different machine can report the error. It doesn't know what to do. So the best it can do is either crash or throw an exception or return an error code. In this case, I think the best thing to do would just be to crash, because it's very cheap for the caller to check for null pointer if it really cares about getting an exception or something. You were in 2009? Okay. That's 10 years ago. So you said putter list. Can you explain to me what a putter list is? Because I'm not familiar with putter list in Boost or in the standard library. Okay, do you mean this? The Edling slumps, it's crazy. Oh, Dr. Zaney. So a common thing, I don't know how common it is, but a common thing in embedded software development is to compile without optimizations, without compiler optimizations. And that means that generating good code is up to the programmer, and that's kind of ridiculous for the programmer to be concerned with things that have been solved 20, 30 years ago, like distinguishing between while true and while one and for semicolon semicolon. Wait, putter list is in the standard library? Really? That doesn't make any sense to me. But I don't... Do you have a reference for that? Putter list. Yeah, come on. Library. Containers? Lists. I don't see... forward list. So here's the class in forward list header, and this is the deck header. There's the list header. There's the vector header. But I don't see any... Oh my god, darn it. Why isn't Control F working? Putter. I said putter. That's private stuff. I don't know what you're talking about for pointer list being in the standard in C++20. Loops are just jump, right? I mean, it depends, but sometimes. My nerdy shirts need to be nerdier. I got some shirts for Christmas. How are things going? They're going okay. You're scared of the scroll bar on my face, or this thing, or this tiny scroll bar on this 11,000 line file. I don't know why I would use pointer list. Isn't this just an adapter? Like, how is that different from using std list? I'm confused. Like, it seems like it just requires that they're non-null or something. I don't know why you would use this. It doesn't seem like it would affect behavior. I don't know why it exists even. Can you explain why you want to use it? Let's pull down your project, because I want to see where you're using this. Delete lists. Yeah. Okay. So the data contained is a B, object care. Okay. So what I'm gonna do is look at your uses of this function and see what's up. It deletes the pointers? Really? What? That doesn't make sense to me. Oh, it takes ownership of it? Oh, there's better ways to solve that. Most likely. So, we have a layer. And we have a pulp layer. Pulp layer is not used. E data structure. Oh, it's here in define layer. So, this is easy to solve. Well, I don't know where you're using pulp layer, because it's only pushed here and it's deleted here and created here. So is this dead code? I don't know what net is doing, or like how. Layer of, yeah, I don't know what is using an ilp layer is not being used. I'm confused. Looking at this one, so you create a list, pulp, you add elements, and they have elements. So this makes more sense. README. net. A set has a net, and set has nodes and layers and stuffs. Well, yeah, but where is PLP layer used? Like you have this list of layers. I don't see where it's used. You're adding, well, you are adding things to the list, but you're not iterating over that list. You're not removing things from the list. You're not seeing if something is in the list. You aren't. I don't know what you're doing with the list, but let's just say that's like incomplete code that you didn't finish or something. But this thing looks, this object care looks like it's more finished. So, no what? NNCPP. So there's, you define layer. Yes, I know you add things to the list with define layer. Here, you're defining the layers, but then you don't do anything with the layers you made. Layer with using layer. Like you're creating them here, yes. But I don't. You mean this stuff? Are you talking about this stuff? In the comments? I don't really follow. Looks like an ogre. Why is that? Because it's German? You don't like German? Oh. Has layers? I do not have a degree in computer science. There's a reference in BAS.txt. BAS. B-A-S-T-X-T? Badge.txt? Layer? I don't know. Oh, okay. Got it. Okay, well, I'll ignore the net thing for now. I will just look at object care. So, what are we storing in object care? We're storing bees in object care. So, you create new Ds and you put them in there. That's why you're using a pointer. Got it. Oh dear. Okay, so going back to your delete list and their elements. Let's put that over here to that file. Delete list and their elements. Is there a reason you're going backwards here instead of forwards? So I thought there might be a reason, but when you say you want pointer list, does pointer list guarantee that it deletes things backwards? Isn't Python more easy to use? Easier to use than what? And for what? Like, sure, I would say in general Python is easier to use, but it's also harder to make it do what I want. Because, in fact, most of the time it can't do what I need it to do. Because it doesn't let me program the machine, and most of the time I want to program the machine. Yeah, create the D's and put it in there. You create it forwards. Guess you want to delete it backwards because it'd be okay. So that's what I thought. But then you were saying you want pointer list, but pointer list doesn't guarantee that, right? So, or at least it doesn't. At least this documentation doesn't say. Maybe it does somewhere. So maybe erase says? I mean, this documentation is crap. It doesn't say where things are deleted or what. Maybe I'm just missing something. Maybe I'm an ancient documentation. Because this says 2006. Boost. No, we're on version 172. That's still the current release. Don't alt tab that fast, at least warn us. Oh, because it's white? You don't like white pages? But get used to it. We have a well-lit room here. None of this dark rabbit hole gaming. Rabbit hole gaming? Basement gaming? So anyway, because there's no guarantee, there's no guarantee that a pointer list deletes things in the order you want. Then you can't rely on somebody doing this for you. So you should do it yourself. But if you don't care about what the order is, then you can switch to that other container if you want. So, or you can do a different solution. We can work on a different way of doing it. Is this like pointer to list of pointers? Yeah. So, using this anywhere? Okay, that's odd. So, okay, hold your horses. Let's go back to the. So that's that thing. Battery ability, for instance, ugly calls in main. So let's look at what you mean there. Are you talking about this being like kind of weird? Are you saying that you want to have something like that instead? Because we can totally do that. Or do you mean some other kind of ugliness in main? Okay. So that's what we want. So we have to look at data structure, have net. So have net returns an iterator. An iterator, and the thing pointed to by the iterator is a pointer. Okay. What? Net. Is net subclassed? There's no subclass of net. Object care. Is there a subclass of edge? There is edge. Okay. So one way to solve this is to somehow get rid of this pointer. If we can get rid of this pointer, then we basically have okay, so a list net pointer iterator is approximately equal to a net pointer pointer. And a list net iterator is approximately equal to a net pointer. And because you have a pointer to a pointer and you want to dereference it twice, you want to get the net out of this thing. You want to get the net, then you have to dereference it twice. One here with this asterisk and one here with the arrow. If you make it like this, then you only need to dereference it once with just the arrow. You don't need the star, right? Gewünschtare? I don't know German stuff at all. Zagriffsart. Yeah, I don't know what that means either. Gewünschtare or Stare or Star? I don't know. So Griffstarart. No idea. That's how you project it to be. Okay. So we either need to make this function return just a net pointer or a iterator to a list of net. Sorry about the German. No, it's fine. I can understand what's going on despite the German. German's mostly in comments anyway, so. And comments are useless anyway. Should be ignored. So, let's see. So, I mean, there's like one way we could do it is to, instead of returning the iterator, we return the net pointer to the net. So we put the asterisk in here. Another way is to change our pop-up net to instead of being a list of, right now this is basically a list of net pointer. We can change that to be a list of net. That's a more invasive change, but that would let us keep returning a list iterator, but return a list iterator to a net instead of a net pointer if we make it a list of net. Another way we could do it is to make a our own iterator class or something. I'll do it in your style. And that could contain the list net star iterator, raw iterator, and then we can define operator arrow ourselves to return raw iterator, to return the net reference. Or maybe you have to return a pointer. I don't remember with operator arrow. Whatever works. This language is C++. The Rome, I've seen very few times where people actually do that. Like the times that people do that is it's much rarer than people doing other things. So, did these three versions, well actually here, I wasn't finished here. So, you would need to create a net iterator from your lists of net star iterator. So you can just create it. But then, so this solution and this solution and this solution would all let you write one fewer star, so you have fewer parentheses, and then, you know, just a bit cleaner. So does that make sense? Shredofpiece. Yes, they're bad comments, but how do you distinguish a good comment from a bad comment? Because explaining why you did something is not gonna make somebody delete their comment. Or saying that you should explain, like that's, yeah. The code should say why it's there, you know? Ideally. I'm not saying don't put comments. I'm saying don't use, oh, I have to explain why I wrote my code as an excuse for writing a comment. Array 0 is C, memset array plus 1 plus size of char times 2. Warcried, what are you talking about? I don't know why the question mark, question mark, question mark. You have to try it out later. Okay. Okay. So that's how to get rid of, like, as is, you can get rid of one set of parentheses. You don't need the innermost. So if you just want fewer parentheses, you can delete that. Non-intuitive counting from 0. I don't know what that means. You can explain what that means? Spasm. And I'm reading this last comment. I don't know what you mean by ASM. Oops. So what does this mean? You don't like it. You don't like what the IT people do. Maybe you should accept. The IT people, how they number their nodes? Yeah, you should totally accept that. You should bend over backwards for making your program match the domain, because otherwise you're going to have bugs. Like mixing units, like mixing meters and feet, or parsing strings as IP addresses, but then sometimes they're IPv4 addresses, and sometimes they're IPv6 addresses, and then you have a bug where you only parse lowercase IPv4 addresses and IPv6 addresses in some component, and then as soon as the configuration file updates with uppercase, your program breaks horribly because you're using strings everywhere and they were handled incorrectly. Like, you should work with how the users use the software, not what you think is the easiest representation to deal with. Why do they count from 0? Why do humans count from 0? Humans, like, we traditionally count from 1. Sorry, I misread. Why do they count from 0? Why do the IT people count from 0? I thought you said they don't. A lot of bases where the first entry is at entry 0, really? So if you have 3 layers, you only have to... Huh? Is this still YAML? Nope, no YAML here. If you have memory address and there lies some piece of data, then the data lies at address plus 0. The next element would be address plus 1. Why wouldn't it be at address minus 1? Ever think of that? No ROM? Why don't we count down? Actually, we do count down sometimes. You have 3 and then you have 2. I don't know what you mean. You have 3. 3. You're so confused by this chat. Yeah, we're speaking all sorts of nonsense. Because you count from 0, so 0 to 1. I don't know what you mean. Why do you count from 0? Well, does it... So, when the IT people set up their stuff, are these numbers sequential? Does it 0, 1, 2, 3? Or could it be 0, 1,000, 3 million, 12? Because that matters a lot. Because if you're counting them like one at a time, then that's a different beast than if they're all over the place. Why do computers count from 0? I think that computers counting from 0 matters less than why shredofpiece is counting from 0. Or, like, where's the counting from 0 happening? I don't know what you mean. Can you point me to the file and the line? The third neuron is addressed to. You mean here? Input node 2, input 5 and 7. I don't, is this comment related to this code? I'm confused. Or is it this one? 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Oh, I guess it's this code is for this comment. Well, these aren't counting from 0. I don't know what you mean. The third neuron is addressed to. Where are we addressing neurons? Oh, okay. So you're saying when you do what is it, object care? Where is object care? Is it here? So when you're doing this stuff, you're saying you're wasting wait, so have node, have elements. You're saying you're wasting 0. I don't know what you mean by where's the 0? Are you talking about in object care? In the list? That you're not using the first thing? Because you're doing this here? Because I imagine count, let's say count is 1. If count is 1, then you're saying we don't want to waste any items in the list. So here, initially, this will be 0. 0 is less than 1, which is true. And we add a thing. Then we say if 1 is less than 1, 1 is not less than 1, then we go over here, and then we advance and whatever. So if count is 1, then you're getting the first thing. So your list is not, at least here, this list is not, like if count is 1, then the size of the list is 1, so you're not wasting anything, right? The third item is labeled with a 2 instead of a 3. Not like for a linked list, nothing's labeling all the items in the linked list with a number. That's your doing if you're mentally thinking about that. If you're talking about you don't like this -1 here, well, too bad. You're saying start at the first thing in the list. Well, I mean, you could write it better so you don't have the -1, but oh, great. So you have your awesome linked list. Do 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 do. Excuse you. And you start with the first step, or after you add things, you get a pointer to the beginning. So this is an iterator to the beginning, and then what you do is you move it. So if we want to, come on, P. So if, let's say we want to move it, or like count is 2. Count in T. Bad handwriting. Let's say count is 2. Then you're saying that we want to advance 2 minus 1, which is 1. So advance 1. Advance 1. Advance 1. There you go. Computers can type better than me. Can write better than me. So you start at the beginning with this iterator here, and then you say move it over 1, or 1. So move it over 1. Okay? Now in your mind, you're thinking that this is labeled 1. But nobody labeled this 1 or 2 or anything. Like you're saying that this is 1 because that's how you advance. But it could have been called 2 just as well. Like if you do this on paper, you can number them however you want, but the thing you're telling the computer to do is to start at the beginning and then move over some number of times. So you're not numbering the items, that's how you're thinking about it, because you're using the advanced algorithm to move over some number of times. Reals start from 0 on the real line. What are you talking about? They start from negative or positive infinity. The numbers in the commands. You mean in here? These numbers start at 1. They're not starting at 0. In fact, if you put 0 here, your program won't work. It'll behave incorrectly. Because you'll make a list with 0 things in it, and then try to get you'll try to advance -1. You'll call advance with -1, and that's going to be invalid, I think. Maybe not, but then you'll get a reference to that, and that, yeah. Yeah, the start point is arbitrary. I agree. Some of that React course. Wait, they're teaching the React JavaScript library in school? Or are you talking about like an online course? React takes forever? What do you mean takes forever? Takes forever for what? So, like, you're not doing anything 0 based here that I can see. Well, Angular and Vue, well, at least Angular, I don't know about Vue, but Angular is more comprehensive. It has more stuff in it. So I would imagine the opposite. It'd be harder to learn because there's more stuff to learn. But React is mostly focused on a UI and event system.